Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women Like Me Stories in Business. I'm your host, Julie Fairhurst, and I have a very interesting lady with us today. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to dive right in because I'm so interested in what she has to tell us. So, today's guest understands something many people don't realize until life forces them to learn it. Sometimes your greatest struggle becomes the doorway to your life's work. Joining us is Allie Chandler, the founder of Upsell Health, a company that helps functional medicine practitioners and wellness brands grow through heart-centered marketing strategies. In this conversation, we'll talk about the emotional reality of chronic illness, resilience, discovering purpose through adversity, sorry about that, and how personal healing journeys can help powerful missions that help others. So, welcome, Allie. Thank you so much for being here. Do you
Oh,
want to
thanks
tell
for
us a
having
little
me.
bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, as Julie said, I got into the functional medicine space because I myself got sick. I have an interesting backstory of kind of switching careers quite a bit. So, my background is in secondary ed, and I was an English and Spanish high school teacher when I started out. And I got sick because after 4 years, decided to quit that job and wanted to just backpack through Europe for a few months with some friends. And long story short, I ended up getting bitten by a tick there and got Lyme
Oh,
disease. And there's a whole like 4 or 5 years of trying to figure out what was wrong with me that, there are a lot of doctor visits and a lot of things to figure out. But I had wanted to go backpack and then kind of switch careers. So I was planning to move to San Francisco, go to grad school. And then I got kind of hit with these pretty severe chronic illnesses. I was never sick before. And so
wow.
this whole journey really determined sort of the path that I'm on now with my career, which I think is kind of a cool story, even though, of course, I didn't want to go through that many years of being very, very ill, but it's kind of what has given me the background to have my current business. So
Yeah.
that's me in a nutshell. I'm sure we'll dive
Okay.
into a lot more
Yes.
questions
Well,
too.
well, interestingly, my first question is if you can tell us during your travels in Europe,
Mhm.
what was the first sign that something was wrong with your health?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So I would say it was night and day. Like it all happened pretty much overnight. It wasn't like a long, dragged out thing. So when I got there, I was super healthy. I was doing like boxing. So not kickboxing, actual boxing, conditioning,
Yeah.
strength training, very healthy eater, never really got sick. And I would say the first thing we were in Switzerland, and all of a sudden I just felt like I had a really bad virus.
Mm.
I was sweating, I had digestive complaints, I had a really bad migraine, I was having trouble thinking, and then the weirdest symptom for me was I felt like I all of a sudden was walking on a boat. It was like my
Oh,
neurological system wasn't like connecting my body to my brain anymore. So I just was having these like weird out of body experiences. I was super paranoid. I had a lot of anxiety, panic. I was kind of like pacing around just because I was like, something's really wrong with my body
yeah.
and I have no idea what it is, just assuming, oh, I just got a weird virus because I'm traveling. But then it kind of progressed and got worse. And, the next day I started having pretty severe cardiac symptoms, which I
Oh,
never had ever had before. So there was a moment when this was before Apple Watches, but
yeah.
I always traveled with this little like it's a pulse ox.
Yeah.
I just always had it with me because I've been in like the functional medicine space and it's nice to know like heart rate and
Yeah.
oxygen and things like that.
Yes.
So I had that on because I was like, what's going on with me? And at one point early in the journey, my heart rate got up to 220 and it just sat there. So I was just having all of these things that I was like, This is not just like a cold or a virus or the flu or something like that. Something is attacking my entire body." And it was just every like system, every organ was having issues. So yeah, it was very much like a light switch. It wasn't like, oh,
Wow.
I don't, it happened overnight. So,
So, how was that emotionally for you? Because you weren't even at home to deal with
mhm.
it.
It was hard. So I was with one girl I was pretty close friends with and one girl I had never met before. And when you're that sick and experiencing so many diverse symptoms, I feel like it's really hard to explain to someone what's going on in your body because I can say like my brain feels weird or I remember saying I feel really toxic. Like I just feel like inside of me is full of toxins. I don't know how to describe that to someone.
Yeah.
And so they, of course, were trying to be helpful. And I remember both of them, rubbing my back and like, can I get you water? Do you need food? But they didn't know what to do. I mean, they're not doctors either. And this was at the time with iPhones, I didn't pay for a plan to be able to talk to anyone while I was there. I just would get on Wi-Fi when I
Mhm.
could, and then I could like email my family. So I couldn't really even have a lifeline to them unless we were, at the hostel or at a hotel or something. So it was
Mhm.
very spotty, my communication with them. And I just remember emailing them and being like, something's really wrong and I don't know how I'm going to get home. So it was really hard and it was very scary. And I would say there were a couple times that strangers, especially in Ireland, I remember in particular, I was having fainting episodes.
Oh my
Again, never
goodness.
never had this in my life, but there was a group of women I remember in the bathroom in Ireland. I had fainted and I had felt really like off and dizzy and everything leading up to the flight. And I remember waking up and they were all just like trying to feed me granola bars and getting me something to drink and just taking care of me. So I felt, yes, it was really terrifying, but I also feel like the good of humanity came out a lot
Yes.
because a lot of strangers did help me, and that was really
Yeah.
comforting.
Wow. So that
Mhm.
must have been terrifying for you.
It was,
Did you
yeah, it
see a
really was.
doctor while you were overseas?
I did briefly because it was actually toward the end of my trip, and
Hmm.
so they had just given me antibiotics because they were like, we don't really know. I mean, they ran some blood work and some basic stuff, but the trip that I was on, we were actually traveling on a bus where we were in a city for like 1 or 2 nights
Ah,
maximum.
yeah.
So I really felt like I didn't have time to like leave this tour, be hospitalized and be left behind. It was really like you're on a guided tour. This is where
Yes.
we're going. Here's the plan. So I kind of, I did an urgent care visit because it was fast, but
Yeah.
they didn't have time to really run like any extensive
Right.
testing on me. And so I just kind of sucked it up and sat in this tour bus. And there's a couple cities that I don't even remember going to because I was just
Wow.
so like out of it. Like I know we went to Belgium. I have no recollection of that city whatsoever. And
Wow.
so yeah, it was I would say in the last like
Mm.
quarter of our trip. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make it home and then we'll figure it out at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
was really, really difficult.
Well, with complex illnesses,
Mhm.
and especially with, I think with Lyme disease, I don't have it. I don't personally know anybody that has it that I'm aware of, but I know that it's as you can be easily dismissed and misunderstood.
Mhm.
So, what was your experience with that? Maybe when you got home.
Yeah, that's actually very accurate. So, a lot of times I feel like, especially women, I've read a lot of studies on women getting dismissed, especially in medical settings, because a lot of times people will say, it just sounds like anxiety or just being emotional, or, you just need to take these anti-anxiety meds or take these sleep meds. And I did experience quite a bit of that where people were just like, oh, your heart's racing, you're just anxious. But 220 beats a minute is not just anxiety. Like it's really not possible to get your heart that high from just being upset about something or anxious. And so I experienced a lot of like I know my body and I never struggled with anxiety. And I didn't feel anxious in my head. It was like my body was rebelling against me and I felt like it was difficult to explain to doctors what was going on because a lot of them were just wanting to triage the situation and be like,
Hmm.
are you dying right now? Are you having a heart attack? Okay, no, you're not. Let's send you back. But then it was like I'd be back in the hospital 4 or 5 days later because something else was going on and I
Wow.
couldn't get my heart back in rhythm, right? Or something was happening where I was like, it's pretty scary. So yeah, it did take me a while to find someone who was willing to really sit down with me and say,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to figure this out. I don't know what's going on. It sounds like these are not normal symptoms, and it's been dragging on for, months and months now. But yeah, I would say I was pretty dismissed, especially in an ER setting, which I get because they're just trying to they're just trying to, like I said, triage the situation, get you home if they
That's
can.
right. They're there to save lives.
Totally. So I,
Yeah.
I get that. But
Yes.
yeah, so then that's how I kind of got into the more functional medicine side because
Yeah.
we would have longer intakes and they would actually like listen to my symptoms and do more testing and it was kind of a slower process, but I did end up finding a few doctors who were like, okay, like, let's test for a couple different things.
Yes. Yeah. So is that when you first discovered functional or root cause medicine?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yep.
when did you realize that healing for you might be possible? Because you must have just thought, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot that happened once I moved to California because I still did move and go to grad school and I graduated with my MFA despite all of this going on. I don't know how I did it. I in the process had to write a 270-page book for my thesis and
Wow.
meanwhile, still trying to figure out what's going on and I was newly married at the time and all the stress of just like figuring out a marriage and moving into a new place and being away from my family. And so I feel like it was a good couple of years until I was like, okay, I'm starting to see progress because it honestly just got worse, probably over the first like 3 or 4 years that I experienced it. And I
Yeah.
had a lot of, I would say, pitfalls and ups and downs and, little things that I think a normal immune system can handle. My body just couldn't because it was, as we know now, I was trying to fight off the Lyme, and that's a big, big task for an immune system. And so, for one example, after this, I kind of started to feel like I was never going to get better, but I had a cavity that turned into a tooth abscess, that turned into C. diff, that turned into shingles.
Oh
And so
my
it was like
goodness.
one little thing would just be this chain reaction because my body was just done. It was like
Yeah.
exhausted and all of its time was kind of taken up trying to fight off the Lyme and the co-infections. So
Yeah.
it was pretty dark, I would say, for a good 4 or 5 years. And then there was one point where I met a practitioner who was like, has anyone tested you for Lyme? And I was like, no, nobody's even brought that up. So when he tested me and then we got my results back and he was like, I know exactly why you're sick. That was such a relief to me because he was like, I hate to tell you this, but these are the worst results, like the most co-infections I've ever seen. And I've been doing this test for like 5 years. So
Wow.
he's like, you not only have Babesia, Bartonella, Lyme, like you had all of these different co-infections that, one tick can carry a lot of different infections. And so he's like, this explains why you're feeling so bad because your body is dealing with so much. And at that point, I was like, okay, like I feel like I have an answer to why I have felt so awful. And that was probably the first moment where I was like, I know it's going to be a long road ahead. And he was very clear about that. But also, I'm willing to do the work because I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Well, and it's so emotionally draining when not knowing what's going on, going to the hospital, they're like, well, maybe you have
Yeah.
anxiety or maybe you have
Yeah.
this and knowing, no, there's something. This is not right. There's
Right.
something not right. And finally coming across, I'm surprised that somebody didn't test you sooner, especially since you'd been out
Yeah.
of the country.
I know. Nobody did. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
why, but I never had a very
Mm,
clear bullseye rash. And so, maybe there's some doctors that asked me, like, did you have a rash like this? And I
yeah,
didn't, but you don't have to get Lyme, It doesn't have to
right.
always present in that same way. So,
Yeah, yeah. So chronic illness, it doesn't just affect the body, of course, it affects your identity, your relationships, your
yeah.
hope. So how did your mindset evolve while you were going through this journey?
That is a very up and down experience. So, yeah, I definitely had a lot of loneliness and isolation. Like I said, even though I was married, I was away from my family and all my friends and where I grew up. And I had to rely a lot on this new husband that, I had been with him for 4 years before we got married. So we had been together quite a while. But I feel like going from being engaged to then like you're my only source of support besides my doctors right now because
Yeah.
I didn't have the energy to really like leave my house or make friends or anything like that. And so it was hard on both of us, but I would say the first couple years I did spend quite a bit of time in this victim mindset, which I didn't know at the time. I was just trying to survive, right? And
Yeah.
looking back on it and kind of processing it now, I can see that I was really in this like pretty negative state of just like, this isn't fair. All my friends are, 26, 27. They're getting married, they're having kids, they're going on vacation, they're doing amazing things with their career. And here I am, I can only lay in my bed and I can't even cook for myself. Like I was so weak that
Oh,
I couldn't even stand for long enough to like make a smoothie. So I'd have to drag a chair into the kitchen and sit and like between pulling out the food, I'd have to rest for like, a couple minutes and then I would be able to move
wow.
forward. But
Wow.
looking back on it and just understanding, like when you're that sick, it is easy to get in that mindset of like, poor me, I'm such a victim. This is awful. I want everyone to feel bad for me. So that was a couple of years of that. And then I would say I transitioned more into like, I'm not going to even talk to anyone because I don't know how to explain
Mm.
this and I'm just going to keep it to myself and that was very lonely. And then after that, I started to get into I learned about something called dynamic neural retraining system, which was limbic system retraining, which I mean, obviously the concept is the brain, it has neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
And that means that we can actually impact the way that we think. We can create new neural pathways. We can really like change the way that we're feeling and pull ourselves out of this victim mindset. And I think that was really huge for me to start doing that work. And it was a lot. It was like an hour a day of these visualizations and affirmations that you had to say to yourself and all of these things that you had to practice. But once you got into that, it was very strict of like no negativity, no talking about your symptoms. You really have to focus on healing. And that was
Mm.
probably the biggest turning point in my entire healing was actually considering the mindset piece
Yeah.
behind it. And I think that's so missing in a lot of treatments. A lot of practitioners have great physical protocols,
Yes.
but then there's the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional side that have to go along with it too.
No, for sure. And I think you're absolutely right. And the problem for someone like yourself is people can't see it.
Yeah,
There's no physical,
exactly.
other than you look exhausted,
Hmm.
but when you're explaining, that you couldn't even make a smoothie, you had to have a chair to sit down and to have a break to getting just the stuff out of the fridge and out of the cupboards. It's yeah, that's not good. That is
Hmm.
no
Yeah.
energy.
And I looked so healthy. I mean, I was, like I said, I
Yeah.
was pretty in shape. I was young. There was nothing on me where people would be like, oh, like she has something going on. So I remember too, one of the things that I had was it's called hyperadrenergic POTS, but part of the heart things that I dealt with was every time I stood up, my heart rate would be like from 55, which was my resting, up to like 160, 170. Until
Wow.
I sat again, it would just stay up because my nervous system forgot how to like manage all of that. And so for me, even like parking and walking into a store, I was wiped out because it's like
Mm.
you're sprinting, your body is acting like you're sprinting. And so I remember talking to my doctor and being like, is it possible for me to get like a handicap placard because I can't walk. I'm exhausted if I go up a hill, my heart rate's like 200. And so that was like a whole conversation where I was like, I know I don't look sick and I know that people are going to be like, well, why is this girl
Yes.
parking here and taking this spot? But I really struggled to even get groceries. I couldn't do
Wow.
it.
Wow.
And so yeah, it is hard having something where it's like very impactful on your life, but you don't look like it is. So people
Yes.
treat you like, oh wow, like I needed a wheelchair to shop because of that. And I know people were like, what is she doing? Like, is she just lazy? Why is she,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely
Wow.
a whole different layer that you have to
Wow.
add on of like, how do I explain this to people? Like at the airport, I remember I'd have to call ahead and say, I need a wheelchair to get from the check-in to my gate. And I would arrange that. And then I feel like I would have to explain to the people at the desk, like, I have a heart condition or I have, there's something going
Yes.
on. Because otherwise, people are like looking at you and you're just like,
Yeah, you're young and healthy. What's your
yeah,
problem? Yeah.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah. Walk on your own 2 feet, girly.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh. So, at what point did you begin to realize that this experience might be shaping your life's work?
So there's a very particular story around that, and I'll summarize it quickly. But the Lyme doctor that I was seeing, I was living in Monterey, California at the time. He was in San Diego, so it wasn't super close, but it was maybe like 5, 6 hour drive. And he was hosting a retreat in person, and my husband was like, "You should really go, spend more time with him in person, be around other people who are also dealing with the same thing." And so I was like, how am I gonna do? Like he was carrying me to the car at this point. I was like, how am I
Oh.
gonna? They're doing rooftop yoga. I'm
Yeah.
nervous to even walk from the
Oh,
the house to the beach for like the sunset with them. Like I can't
yeah.
even do that. So he convinced me that it would be a good idea to go. And so I went, and everyone else I feel like was pretty healthy at that retreat. I was definitely the only one who was like having to be wheeled around and pushed around. But yeah, he had convinced me to go, and I'm glad that I did because this doctor I was working with, I had overheard him telling someone else on his staff that he needed help with marketing. And this is actually how I got into my field,
Oh,
is I had just graduated with my master's in writing, and I was working with someone actually in the health and wellness field doing writing for her, and he knew her. So I was like, "Hey, I'm working for this person. Like I'd love to help. I'm not full time with her. Like I'd love to help you guys
yeah.
out." And so he ended up hiring me. There was a whole process of being interviewed and showing him what I could do, but he ended up hiring me part-time at first. And he later, I was with him for I think 3 years doing blogs, email marketing, high ticket sales, his coaching program. And then he went on to actually create a supplement company that was very successful. So he
Ah.
brought me over there. And we worked with people with Lyme. It was supplements for people that had,
Oh,
pathogens and Lyme and all of the things that I had dealt with. So it felt
yeah.
really fulfilling for me to still kind of be like going through treatment, but being able to speak to people that were who were hopeless, like I was. Like I
Yes.
nobody gets this and I'm so sick and like what am I gonna do? And those products actually are a huge part of what helped me get better. So there's definitely like a very full circle moment there. And that's
Yeah.
really how I kind of got into this and have stayed in, the
Wow.
functional medicine marketing.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
you describe your approach as heart-centered marketing. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, another way I describe it is also empathy-led marketing. So,
Ah,
yeah, and I have never heard anyone use these terms, but I do think my experience with being sick has led me to this like new way of marketing. Everyone I work with, their audience is chronic illness, people with chronic illness. And so the direct sales marketing, the really like I call it used car salesman marketing.
yeah.
It's all the like urgency and the flashing lights and the
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if you don't buy this right now, you're
Yeah.
never going to get better. That doesn't work on people whose nervous systems are already very dysregulated and they're already feeling like isolated and not heard and
Right.
seen. So,
Yeah.
the way that I do marketing for my clients now is it's very education focused, it's value driven, and I honestly believe that if you can genuinely give value and show up as your authentic self, whether you're a brand or a practitioner or whoever you are in this space, and then build that trust with your audience. Like, hey, I see you. Here's some tips that can help. Here's a blog. Here's this, without it all being focused on sales, that you really are able to build that
Yes.
relationship. And then the sales come. I truly believe that trust is the most important thing. People have to know you, like you, and trust you if they're going to buy something from you.
Yes.
So my marketing is very much driven by what I needed to hear when I was sick, which was you're not crazy. There's something going on. We're
Yeah.
going to figure it out together. And here are some resources that can help. And by the way, PS, we have this course. If this is interesting for you, check it out. It's very like soft, a soft way of selling. But
Yes.
again, we do like master classes. We do sales. We do stuff like that. But the way that we approach it is a lot different. It's not in your face. It's not creating more nervous system dysregulation. It's a very gentle, soft, like, here's some resources, here's what we have that might help you. If it's a good fit, that's great. But
Yeah.
we're not going to ever be like in your face about it because that doesn't
Yes.
work.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Well, so tell me about storytelling. So
Mhm.
why do you feel it's such a powerful tool for the wellness and healing space?
Yeah, so that actually is a great question. And I have developed, I call them my archetypes, which you can see behind me.
Ah,
Um,
I've got that down.
yeah,
Patient
yeah.
architect
Yes,
archetype quiz.
exactly. Yes. So basically, what I have created, and this has to do with the storytelling, is I've studied all of the practitioners that I've met in the last sort of 12 years of being in the industry. And I created 15 different practitioner archetypes. And all of them have their own sort of special way to market and way to tell stories about themselves or what's important to them. And it's all based on their motivations as a person, their fears, their core beliefs, their wounds. It's sort of like the ultimate personality test for practitioners. But then I have the patient version too, which is like, what do you need to hear as a patient?
Hmm.
So for me, it was really important for me to find someone who actually had been sick before as a doctor and had gotten themselves better. I don't know why that was such a thing for me, but I refused to work with anyone who hadn't had Lyme or hadn't had something like pretty serious and healed themselves because I wanted that sort of like shared understanding because I was so tired of people being like, push through it, like you'll be fine. It's
Yeah.
just this. So I wanted someone with that lived experience. And so in creating this whole archetype system, I feel like I was able to really study what people are wanting to hear on the patient side, which is the patient archetype, and then how to tell the story of healing in a way that resonates. So for
Right.
every practitioner and patient, there's like a one-to-one match, and then there's some that are you'd still be great with these people. There's some that are like, these are maybe not the best fit with what you believe and what you want. But when I was interviewing practitioners for this, one of the most common answers for like what goes the best when you're marketing on social or on email, and it's always been stories. It's always been
Mm.
personal anecdotes. It's showing who you are as a person. And I do believe that that part of that is really building that trust and authenticity that I've been talking about is patients want to like see who you are. They want to know like
Absolutely.
who you are as a person. What do you eat for breakfast? Should I be eating that? Like, what do you take for supplements?
Yes.
How do you stay healthy?
Yes.
And so that's something that I think isn't often talked about in this world because practitioners might feel like they have to do everything perfectly. Like, oh, I could
Hmm.
never eat a gluten-free pizza and post it on my story because everyone's going to say, what are you doing? But I
Yeah.
think it's all about being real and it's all
Yes.
about, hey, I'm great 95% of the time. It's okay to eat a gluten-free pizza every once in a while. I do
Yes.
it. Like you have to like kind of get rid of some of that shame
Right.
and
Yeah.
perfectionism. So all of that kind of ties together just to
Ah,
say like
interesting.
connecting as a human in the marketing realm to me is the most important. And I think storytelling is a great way to do that.
Absolutely. I agree with you. So, so why do you think some people struggle to find the right support on their healing journey?
Yeah, I mean, multiple reasons. I think one reason is practitioners may not know how to portray what they do in
Hmm.
a good enough way online. And that's also what I found when I was looking for a Lyme practitioner. The first thing I would do is go to the about page because I'd want to read like,
Yes.
who is this person?
Yes.
Am I going to connect with them? Do I trust them? Could I learn to trust them? Because sometimes you land on a website and you're like, I immediately don't feel the energetic connection,
Right.
or,
Yes.
it just doesn't feel like a good fit. So I think
Yes.
a lot of it is trusting your gut in that way. But I did notice that a lot of doctors, when I was looking, didn't really do a good job of summarizing, like, what does it look like to work with you? Is it a 9-month protocol? Is it like, do I come into your office once a week? Or there just wasn't a good explanation. And so I
Mm.
think part of it is that you have to do so
Yeah.
much digging in order to understand, like, is this even an experience I want? And also, it's expensive. So you're also nervous to like
Yeah.
set up an appointment because it could be like $700, $800 for that first appointment. And I think part of it too is just like knowing what you want. And when you're sick, you don't really think about that. You don't really think about like, do lab tests matter to me? Do I need to see data that I can measure to know I'm getting better? Or am I okay with going by how I feel and maybe
Uh,
tracking my symptoms? So I think
yeah.
on that end, a lot of patients aren't
Yes.
necessarily consciously thinking about what's important to them. And when you're that sick, you're just like, I'll do whatever anyone says if it's a good fit.
Yeah.
But I think there's a smarter way to go about it where you can say, like, for example, it's really important to me to have someone who also believes in emotional healing and maybe could
Right.
recommend or refer me to like an energetic healer or a therapist or something like that. But some people don't care about that. So I think on both ends, it's just knowing one, who you are as a practitioner, how to portray it, and two, as a patient, what's important to you, and use that to sort of like weed out any practitioners who might not be a good fit. It's almost like a dating app in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. No, I
you should,
understand what you're saying. I
yeah, like
agree. Yeah.
exactly. You should know what's important to you. You should know your deal breakers. And it's like a whole matching system that
Yeah.
is invisible when you're looking for a practitioner.
So interesting. So,
Mhm.
what would you say to someone who is currently in the middle of a long and confusing health journey?
Yeah. I think the thing I needed to hear the most was that healing is possible. I didn't feel like it was for probably the first 3 quarters of me being sick. I just was like, okay, this is my life. Like, I'm just going to have to get used to this. This is a new way of living. I'm trying to come to terms with it. But I do think that your mindset is hugely important. And I
Hmm.
didn't get better until I really worked on the aspect of my brain and getting into the mindset of healing, getting out of the victim loop, calming my nervous system. And so I think the message that I would tell people is it's okay. If you're not hitting it on the first practitioner, just
Yeah.
I guess sit down and understand what you're looking for, what you want. Are there any root causes that maybe you haven't uncovered? Do you need to do more digging? But also believe that you can heal because I do think our bodies are always listening. And if you can give your body that affirmation of like, hey, I trust you, I love you, I know you're doing your best, because our bodies, I think, they don't want to be sick. They want to
No.
be in this
No.
like balance and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't
No,
they
for
don't want
sure.
to exist in this state. So
Yeah.
some of it is just like learning to talk to your body in an encouraging way, almost like you would a friend who was sick. Like you're gonna get through this. We're
Yeah.
going to be okay. Like I
Yeah.
love you. You're not my enemy.
Yeah.
And so when I learned to kind of like self-reflect in that way, I think that was really, really a turning point for me in my healing.
Wow. Yeah. So when people take the quiz, because I know that or hopefully you will have access to the quiz.
Yeah.
So do they work with you for that? Can they just find out their architect on their own and does it help them to understand? I think
Yeah.
it's brilliant, really.
Yeah. They don't have to work with me. Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
available to kind of do self-diagnose,
Yeah.
self-reflection. And so yes, I do have the patient archetype and the practitioner archetype, which people can take.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole series of emails that are completely free
Yeah.
that I send after that's just like, hey, let's dive into does this resonate with you? Are any of these wounds
Right.
that you had in childhood?
Yes.
Is this like a fear that you have as you're
Yeah.
healing, or is this
Yeah.
important to you? So it kind of walks you through what I was talking about of like understanding, what's important to you. It'll kind of walk you through those steps. So there's a guide. You don't have to buy it, but there is like a full report. It's like 30 some pages.
Yeah.
If you want to do a deep dive, it's totally
Yeah.
self-study.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's other things like affirmation decks and other like little healing things based on your archetype that you can
Yeah.
add if you want to, but you don't have to. You could totally
Yes.
just take it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
understand more about yourself.
But yeah, I think it's great because I mean, our health is really one of the most important thing. And I
Absolutely.
think it's super important that we understand what, what's important to us when it comes to
Mhm.
our health.
Definitely.
And again, so this might not be important to anybody at all, but this might be 100% important. So, no, I'm going to take it myself. It sounds
Great.
very, very
Good.
interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Well, if someone is listening and they've been going through something really difficult and is wondering if they could become their purpose, what would
Mm.
you say to them?
Yeah, you mean step into their purpose of like, what does this mean to me? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think, like I said, my favorite tool that I used was working with a therapist on EMDR. So if anybody has experienced trauma, it was really important for me to be able to process that, to be able to think clearly about like, what am I doing with my life? What do I want to do? Like, how do I
Yeah.
process these things that have happened to me in order to step into like my best self? And when you're sick, you're probably not ready to do that yet because you're just focused on healing. So I would say it's something that probably comes toward the end, closer to the end of this like healing journey. But yeah, I would say looking at tools, regulating your nervous system, and kind of getting rid of all these like distractions and triggers. And like I was so dysregulated for probably 8 to 9 years that even
Wow.
walking into a grocery store, the lights were too bright, the smells made me feel horrible. My heart would just like
Wow.
beat out of my chest, and I would have to
Yeah.
have like sunglasses and a hat and like be in a wheelchair. So working through all of the regulation and the nervous system and the processing actually helped me rediscover. I always tell people I feel like I lost my personality when I was sick. I was super outgoing my whole life, and I love to go up to strangers and talk to them, and I just didn't have the energy. So I
Yeah.
became very introverted, and I was
Yeah.
like, this isn't me. Like, I feel like I'm not even myself. So once you kind of get a little bit more through it and you're able to process, like, I think chronic illness is a trauma in itself. So even if you didn't have any like
Yes.
traumas in
Yeah.
your past that you can identify, being sick is a trauma. And so you
Yes.
could consider, whatever type of therapy resonates with you to kind of process that. But I think all of these tools and just getting your own body and nervous system regulated really help you to clearly see, like, okay, well, where am I going to go from here? Where am I
Hmm.
going to take this? Am I going to stay in this, like, poor me, which is easy to do because it is
Oh,
awful to be so sick. Um, but that was what was able to help me elevate out of it and be like, okay, let me focus the rest of my career on helping people avoid the things that I had to go through, which was, 10 years of going through doctors and spending $20,000, $30,000 easily, probably more than that on treatments and practitioners and things like that. So
wow.
I think,
Wow.
yes, all of those things were really helpful for
Wow. Well, Allie, this has been such a good conversation
me.
and so helpful to people who are going to be listening or watching. Um, it's it's really got me thinking. I mean, I'm healthy, knock on wood, but
Yeah.
it's thinking about that. Like, really it's all of it.
Mhm.
It's really mind, body, spirit,
Yes,
and just paying attention and
definitely.
thinking about it and
Self-reflection
knowing
is
that there's
key.
help. You just
Yes.
have to, sometimes when you're not feeling well, it's hard to search, but sometimes
Mhm.
they can reach out to somebody like you who's been through it, who
Yeah,
might be able to guide them in the right direction.
definitely.
So
Yeah.
appreciate you doing that. Those, thank you so much. So I want everyone to know that we are going to have Allie's contact details, how you can reach out to her in the show notes. So don't hesitate to reach out to her. Jump on and take the quiz. It sounds
Yeah.
super, super interesting. I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm so interested to take it. So thank you
Awesome.
for doing that, and thank you for offering
Absolutely.
it, and thank you for being here and being so willing and open to share with everyone. It's just so appreciative. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking with you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, everyone. So we will see you again on Women Like Me next time. Take care. Bye.